Still life is the art of drawing or painting inanimate objects, such as fruit, flowers, and household items, which are usually arranged on a table or shelves. Artists have been doing this throughout the years, but it's also a great way to learn and to develop your observation skills. Today we're going to learn how to do a still life drawing using charcoals. I'm going to show you how to set up your objects at home and how to get started on a still life drawing. First thing you're going to do is choose 3 household items that interest you. It's important they're not too difficult, but also something interesting that you'll be motivated to draw. Next thing is you want to think about your lighting situation. I like to have my light coming from one side, just like one light source. So you can find a lamp and get it set up so you have some nice highlights and shadows on your picture. You can use whatever supplies you have at home to start your still life, but I did want to go over really quickly just what you'll see me using in this video so that you have an idea. I have a mechanical pencil, a ruler, 2 charcoal pencils. I'm using, I think, a 3B and a B, but whatever you have will work great. Some blending stumps, some Willow charcoal, a kneaded eraser, these are super helpful, as well as a normal eraser, and also something called a mono eraser, which is really great for erasing these tiny little areas and getting those highlights. Here are the 3 objects I chose to base my drawing off today. Like I said, you can pick 3 objects that you like. They can go together or they don't have to make sense at all. It's totally up to you. So before we jump in and start our big drawing, we're going to make 3 little drawings first. These are called thumbnails. They can be the size of a business card or maybe a little bit bigger. This really helps us figure out what layout we want to do. I like to try 3 different layouts for each thumbnail that I make, and it helps us figure out what problems we might run into down the road when we start our bigger picture. So I have my 3 objects set up in a way that I like. I think the composition looks pretty good this way, so it's time to make a thumbnail. I'm going to go ahead and grab my pencil and a ruler, and I'm going to make 3 little boxes on a piece of paper. From here, I'm going to go ahead and sketch out the objects in front of me just the way that I see them. So now that my first thumbnail's done, I'm ready for the next one. So I'm going to take a look at my objects again and rearrange them to find a new composition. So when you're figuring out how you want your objects to sit on your picture, it's important to think about balance. You don't want to see your objects squished together or all of them on one side. So you want to play around with it until you have a nice balanced composition. Another thing I like to figure out during the thumbnail stage is whether I want my picture to be vertical or horizontal. And you'll notice that really depends on the composition. So you'll see the composition in the middle, I ended up making it vertical because I think it would look better if I picked that one to have my picture be vertical. Now I'm going to go ahead and figure out my 3rd layout or composition for my last thumbnail. Looking back at these 3 thumbnails, I'm now going to pick my favorite for my bigger drawing. I ended up going with the last one that I did. Looking back on it, I'm not sure why. I think I figured that'd probably be the easiest. I have my 3 objects set up just like they were in that last thumbnail, and it's time to start my actual drawing. The best place to start is with the line from the end of the table. So I'm going to take my ruler and a pencil and go ahead and get that line in. From there, it helps me see how my objects are going to land on the picture. And what I'm doing to start off is I'm just doing the most basic shapes really lightly with my pencil. So it's so important when you're drawing to start with simple shapes and then add details later on. You'll notice that I use my eraser a lot during this stage because it's so important that you get your outline right before you add your shading and your details on top of it. Once my outline was done, I went ahead and blocked in where my shadows were going to go with my pencil. It's much easier to erase pencil than it is to erase charcoal, which is why it's important to block in those shadows and get them right where we want them before we pick up the charcoal pencils. When you're ready, you can go ahead and pick up the charcoal pencil and start with the darkest shadows that you see on your picture. And in my picture, that is the cast shadow coming off of the objects. So that's the part that I'm going to start with. Now I'm going to move over to my blending stump, blend out those dark shadows, and then fill in the rest of the shadow. With shadows, they're the darkest closest to the object, and then they spread out and get lighter and lighter the further away that they go. Now I'm looking for the second darkest part of my object, and I'm seeing some shadows up at the top of the candle. So I'm going to go ahead and put in those dark areas with my charcoal pencil. To get some of the lighter areas of my candle, I grabbed a piece of scrap paper and my Willow charcoal, and I just scribbled some off to the side, and I'm going to use my blending stump to dip into that extra charcoal on the scrap piece of paper and fill in some of these lighter areas. I noticed that my hand was smudging the charcoal already on my drawing, so I put a scrap piece of paper over the other two objects, that way I don't smear the picture. So I'm going back and forth between my eraser, my pencil, and my blending stump to try to get the shadows and the highlights in the correct places. It's so important to look often at the objects in front of you and really work to capture what you see. For the seashell, I'm starting with the darkest spots, which are like the stripes on the seashell. I'm blending it out with the blending stump, and you can see me going back and forth between my erasers, my pencil, and my blending stump in order to get my shadows and my highlights and all of the details on the seashell in there just as I see them. When you're drawing an object that has more than one color in it, like the seashell, it can be tricky to see where the values go in black and white. One thing that can help is taking a picture and changing it to black and white. It can be a super helpful tool, but I do want to encourage you not to draw from the photograph, really try to draw from life. I decided to leave off the label on the bottle and just really focus on those highlights and shadows. Last thing I did was add a little shading to the line in the back of my paper where the table touches up against the wall. Here's my final still life. I had a lot of fun drawing from life. I want to encourage you to find your own 3 objects and to do this yourself. It's a great way to improve your drawing.